Thank you so much for joining us today, Kaiser University Multidisciplinary Center, as we present today's webinar, Literacy Preparing for Employment, Part 1, presented by Dr. Jessica Fuda Daddio.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I am Dr. Jessica Fuda Daddio, and this is part 1 for preparing for employment for our students, kind of getting them prepared for employment. So we're just going to do some exploration today. But before we get started, let me share a little bit about me. My background is actually in literacy. So everything that my doctorate, all of it, it's all literacy based. But so is everything else. So you'll kind of get that feeling as we go through this presentation about the impact and the importance of literacy in every aspect of our lives. But I'm also a professor here at Kaiser University, teaching in the doctoral program as well as the master's program of education, and an academic advisor. I also consult for local school districts in the area of literacy, specifically 7th through 12th grade special education, kind of helping to prepare the students for graduation. So with that being said, what we noticed, and something that was kind of a little scary, I'm going to just kind of jump in there with this story, but I remember sitting at a meeting one time with the special ed teachers, and they were sharing about their students. And more than not, we had a lot of the students graduating at a first grade reading level, which is quite scary, actually, especially if we wanted them to, go into society and be able to get a job and have a good life and do all of those things. And that kind of motivated me more to work with these teachers and help them in helping their students. So the conversation today is just as important in the sense that not only are we trying to help them with employment, but we're also just helping them to become able to look at literacy and understand it in a way that will help them to better their own lives. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. So this is the description for today's webinar. And we are going to explore how to research for a job and prepare for the workforce with a focus on literacy. And we need to think about the graduating students, right? They need to be prepared to enter into the workforce, but also just to enter into life. All right. So this part 1 is preparing for employment. So the focus will be on the real life literacy, researching and how to prepare for that job. But more so from the teacher aspect, how can the teacher help the students to do that? So the objectives for today are the participants will explore the definition of literacy. That will be something you're going to see a lot in my webinars for these next few ones I have, because it's important to remember the definition of literacy and not the simple kind of process that we take, like it's reading and writing. No, it's so much more than that. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And we will be talking about that for part 2, which I think is on Thursday. The participants will learn how to research for a job. So I'm going to take you through some things to look at to help students to research for jobs. And then we will talk about the literacy that is needed to prepare to work in the workforce. So there's a lot of skills that we need to make sure our students are capable of before they leave us. So let's talk about literacy and the power of it. So literacy is everywhere. It is how we read and write. Yes, 100%. That's always what people go to when they think literacy. But it's also about listening. It is about communicating, thinking, and speaking. So when we're thinking about or talking to our students about critical thinking or problem solving, that's literacy. How we speak to one another is literacy. So all of that is important, especially when we're thinking about getting a job. So it's not just about reading and writing, it's about every aspect of our communication, and just kind of human interactions are all literacy. So when we look at the 5 pillars of reading specifically, okay, so if we're looking in reading and what students need to know as they get out there, they do need to be aware of these aspects. They all interconnect, right? So phonics, phonemic awareness, comprehension, vocabulary, and fluency. But the definition of reading is quite simple. It is meaning making. And so when we think about that, when we're teaching our students about reading specifically, we are talking to them about making meaning. Through making meaning, as we know, the only way to do that is through critical thought. and to take things in and communicate and discuss things and try to figure out what something means. So if the comprehension level is low, then we're going to have problems as we continue on into society, into the workforce. So we really want to focus on this idea of literacy with our students. Even though we might do so, we need to make it more real life when it comes to 7th through 12th grade, right? It's not, again, I said this at my other webinar, it's not just about them being able to read a novel, but to understand the way that literacy works in the real world. And also, many times, and I think I said this before too, and I'll probably say it again, when they get to 7th through 12th grade, they're defeated. If they have struggled with literacy along the way, and their aspect or thought process of reading is a novel, then they may already feel defeated by the time they get to middle and high school. And so our goal and our job at the high school level is to help them to rethink this idea of what it means to engage in literacy. And that's what's going to help them to understand how to go out into the real world and actually be able to be part of that real world in a really successful way. So because meaning making is the central aspect of literacy and of reading, I wanted to share with you a network of processing systems for reading. Now, this right here, this little graphic you see on the left-hand side of your screen is quite important. And it's not something we think about. And I will, again, discuss this not only in this webinar, but also on Thursday. And when we talk about phonics, a while from now, I'll also be bringing this back up again. But this here is comprehension is to comprehend and make meaning of text within, beyond, and about the text. So what that means, if we look at the system, is within the text is quite literal. So students can look at this and solve words, look at a sign, look at a newspaper, they'll be able to solve the words in that paper, right? They're able to summarize somewhat of what they read. But about or beyond the text is when we go a little bit deeper, where they start to make predictions. Now, what this beyond the text aspect of this is that the students have a background knowledge that they're capable of pulling from to create deeper understanding of whatever situation they're in. So remember, literacy is not just about reading. It could also be a job. Something happens on the job. So what do? How do you problem solve through that? Well, they have to have some background information of something that may have happened in their lives to help them to make the right decision. Okay, so when we think comprehension, like I said, it's deeper than a novel. It is life. And then about the text is when we critically analyze and critique what we see around us, right? So in a text, it might be, how did the author write the story or write the book to help me understand it better? In real life, it's the same idea. What's happening in my workplace or at school or wherever I'm at that makes me have to, that what are they doing to make me feel the way that I do? And you start to analyze the situation. Through that, it all kind of comes together in a circle where we then begin to start over again. So our background knowledge begins to become even more extensive because of our experiences that we have. So comprehension is the center of absolutely everything that we do in our life, everything. And so, like I said, it's bigger than a novel. So it is an intermix of processes that are happening within the brain. So that, like I just said, is just this idea, this circling that happens. I was just checking the chat, make sure there wasn't there. Okay, there you go. Everything looks good. All right. So, but it's like the circling of things that are happening in our brain that help us to create a deeper understanding of the situations that we're in. Okay. So it's not just about novels. It is also about life. So what I want to do today, and this is going to be pretty straightforward. And some of you that are teaching, most of you will be, those of you watching this at the Florida schools are probably quite familiar with some of the things that I might be talking about. But at the same time, it's really good to have a reminder of the things and the resources available to you. So as we begin to help students, I want to take us into the Florida Department of Education website. Okay. And so and I love the way, and I told you this before, but I love the way that the Florida Department of Education website is set up. It's very user friendly, easy to find everything that you need. So you can kind of see what I searched here, from home to academics to exceptional student education, taking us into secondary transition. So as we know, and when the students are around 14 years old, we begin to create a plan of action, right? A plan of action to help students to make the transition out of high school into the real world, into this idea of career. And so this obviously gives you that definition here, is that age 14 is when this all begins, to try to help them to transition out of school into, again, the real world. So what I do here is just kind of put this into this PowerPoint to just bring us to this page, just as a reminder of what this might look like. So we know that there's a lot of work that goes into play. We also know that we have to come up with a lot of plans to help the students in succeeding with that transition. Always knowing we can go back and make modifications if we need to. So as I go down, obviously the state laws and regulations gives you a bunch of Florida resources, which is really nice too. And there are different things in here too. So the employment transition plan template, I thought that was kind of nice. And I'm sure you're probably using those if you're actively teaching. The requirements needed. Also, ideas for job development. So this one, and I'm hopeful that you can see where my mouse is, or maybe you see where I'm looking under Florida resources, but there's an online training module here. One thing I will say is, as I clicked on the online training module, there seems to be somewhat of an issue with it, and I didn't really go anywhere. So maybe they'll update that as as they start to get back into their website. But this job development training module could really be helpful to our students, but also to ourselves, to know what we need to talk to students about. So as I go down, and since we're talking about employment, I was looking at employment first, okay? And so when you click on employment first, I'm going to do that, even though, okay. And so this kind of just gives us an idea of, how to talk to people about work, things like that. So it gives you a nice video, all of this great stuff here. But I don't want to sit here very long. As a matter of fact, I might come back to this page on Thursday to discuss some of these things. But what I want to do more so is go to the Employ Florida. This goes right off of the website to the Florida Department of Education website. So this is pretty great for teachers, not just for students who are looking to be employed, but also for teachers to walk their students through. And also for teachers to plan on how to teach students how to get a job. And here's why. I'm going to do a really quick search. Hopefully this all works for us here. We know how technology can be. But let's say that I'm going to get into something in service. Okay. So whatever that might look like. So I'm a student. I want to get, into a job. And I'm just going to type service in there. Let's see what it comes up with. So it's processing my request. And it does not look like anything came up. So let's go back. Maybe, hopefully all this works. Okay, so let's try. Let's do restaurants. Oh, I know what it is. Just a second. I know why. As you can see, it has the wrong area code. So let's do Fort Lauderdale. That might help us a little bit in finding things in Florida. Here we go. Search for jobs. Now we got something here. Very good. Okay, so yeah, you have to be in Florida to use this website. At this current time, I am not in Florida. So all right, so here we are. So as teachers, as students, we can get into this website. We can start to search for things, and you see all of these jobs that are coming up. So I want us to go. Let's just go into customer service representative. Let's do that. So I can go into any of these. But all right, so now I have a student that are kind of interested in being a customer representative. They can make between $27,000 to $41,000. That's great. And then as we look at this, it talks to us about the primary responsibilities. So these are conversations to have with students, right? So you have to be able to do all of these things, being responsible, being able to respond. So notice the words are all adjectives, or I'm sorry, they're all verbs in the sense that we need to be able to do these things successfully, right? Knowledge, skills, and abilities, the minimum qualifications. So this is pretty high, given that you're probably looking at a high school student looking for a job. Let's go out of this one. I'm not liking it. Hold on. Let's go to something a little bit more realistic. Just a second. And what I mean by realistic more so is just like a high school student that wants to come out and get into the job force. Let's go into this one. All right. Okay, so this tells me where it's at. All right, so let's go down. I was looking specifically to show you. See if I can find it. Yeah, okay, perfect. So if this is a job one of the students is interested in, so you read through this together, talk about it, discuss it. And then when we get down here, this is what I think is really great, because this actually goes right into this idea of literacy, okay? So requirements for cashiers, okay, so what do they need to know? Tools and technologies that they would have to know as well, right? So we know that we can teach these tools and techniques at school to help students to be successful. But this right here is what I really like, which is this personal skills for cashiers. So as we look at how to help students in moving from high school into employment, we do need to look at personal skills. That's really what we're teaching them through literacy. So that literacy, like I said, it's this idea of it's meaning making, but it's also this idea of being able to connect with other people and know how to problem solve and critically think. And so if we look at this page, it tells you exactly the personal skills and the importance of the skill as you go through your career. So, or as you go into this career. And not only that, so service orientation. Okay, so that means, do we have a student that actually likes to look for ways to help people? If they do, that's great, right? Speaking, talking to others to convey information effectively. So that's a big one, this idea of speaking, being able to communicate effectively with others. Now, what I will tell you is just from my own experience in this world, now, a lot of our students are so into this texting and all of this other stuff, but do they really know how to have a conversation face to face? What does that look like? Without using some of those acronyms they use for texting, right? So we need to have our students talking, which means maybe we have a presentation type activity in our classes where students do have to talk out loud in front of people. Maybe there are partners, projects you could do to help students to talk effectively with one another. The other idea is active listening. And so this idea of being an active listener, so not just being a listener, but to really give somebody your full attention. And we know just as people, that's really difficult to do, especially with the technologies we have. Think about it, your smartwatch, your iPhone, whatever might be around you. To be able to really look at somebody and give them your full attention and hear what they're saying is super important, especially as we get out into the real world. So these are things that we want to be teaching our students in school to help them prepare for employment. Now, what I'm going to do real quick here is I'm going to take us out of this. I just wanted to give you an idea that this, if you go into this website, abilities work, it tells you every single thing that you need to know and do to be successful. As a teacher, I would go to this website to find exactly what my students would need to know to be successful in the careers they're interested in. Okay. Especially personal skills, because you can teach people. You can teach people how to do a job. You can teach them that. But what you cannot teach them prior to them getting into the job is how to build these personal skills, right? That should be coming through what we're teaching them through the lives that they're living. And they should be able to take those natural skills that they have and bring them into a job. So it's really important that we're focusing on these, especially in high school. Before that, obviously, is also very important too. So it's not just about middle and in high school, it's about all grade levels. But I want to take you back to our PowerPoint just real quick here so we can look at this listing that I have created for us here, giving us the big ideas of, this is the job search. Okay, the literacy skills necessary for success in employment. So just from that little list that you saw there, I went into several different jobs and looked at what seemed to be important in a lot of the different jobs available to students um, that might have that might have some special needs, or just kind of are looking for a job to get started out there in the real world. So the literacy skills needed, okay, critical thinking was huge. So as I looked at all of the different jobs out there available in Florida for our students, critical thinking was almost number one for a lot of them. And what this means is this idea of being able to problem solve and to really think outside of the box sometimes, knowing that when we're working with other humans, that we need to know different ways to be able to solve those problems and things that might come up in a job. Speaking was the next one. Speaking, being able to have a conversation, to connect with other people. So what that says is that at school, we need to be having more opportunities for students to be connecting with other people, more than just their friends. How do you have a conversation with somebody when you don't see things on the same page? How do you professionally disagree? What does that look like? Active listening, we talked about that one. You do need reading comprehension in many of the jobs that are out there for our students. And so when we think of reading comprehension, remember those 5 pillars I shared with you earlier: phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary, fluency, and then you have comprehension. So reading comprehension is important. The students need to be able to look at something, be able to read it to the best of their ability and comprehend what it means. But that does not mean a novel. In the real world, they're not going to be handed a novel and told to read it at a job. Okay. But they do need to know how to read something and understand what it means. All right. So we have to start to give them real life opportunities in reading. And even if that's a news article, a magazine article, it could be something on the internet, like a website or something where we have them get in and look at something just short, because nothing they're given is going to be super long in the real world. Problem solving, again, we already talked about this too, but the problem solving aspect is all part of literacy. So how do we solve problems? Well, we need experiences to solve problems. And so in the schools, where I know there's a lot of opportunity for things to come up for students to try to solve, how to get through them, even conflict, right? So a conflict with friendships, things like that. Those are conversations that need to come to the table too with our teachers, but they have to trust the teacher. So what I mean by that is you have to build that relationship with the students in order to help them to feel comfortable enough to share if there's a conflict happening. And then what do you do? So social stories are another great way to help students to think about problem solving. So if you haven't used social stories in your classrooms, it's probably one of the greatest things you could do, and have those real life conversations, all of which are based in literacy and will 100% help them in the job, in employment. Judgment and decision making, time management. So if you are, in your classrooms, we could set up time management schedules for our students so they can get an idea of what it feels like to have this much time to do something, that much time to do this, and kind of set them up in that, in that idea of completing a job on time, completing a task on time, being on time, right, to get to work, leaving the job when you're supposed to, punching in, punching out, but also and we can do that starting in school, being on time to get to our classes, knowing how long we're going to be there, knowing when we have lunch. So it seems simple because it's what we do on a regular basis. It appears at school because there's maybe a bell that rings or however it works at your schools, but it actually is a conversation that needs to be had. Is what is time management? What does that mean? What does it look like? The next one is collaboration. So this idea of collaboration is, it again, seems simple, but you as teachers probably know how hard it can be to collaborate. What is collaboration exactly? There is no universal definition of collaboration, but to be able to collaborate, we need to be able to work with one another. And all of the skills I just talked about are part of it, right? To be able to speak, to actively listen, to problem solve. All of those things help in this idea of collaborating with others. So sometimes there's people with really strong personalities, or your big, your extroverts, that can take over a conversation. How do you handle that if you're an introvert? What does it look like to actually share in the workload, be able to talk with other people from different perspectives. So collaboration is huge. This is one thing that I know that I work on a lot with the teachers that work with our students, because it is such a big piece of getting out there into the workforce and being successful at it, right? Is to have those conversations. But all of the other aspects do roll right into this idea of collaboration. Writing is something that is definitely needed in our workforce, but in a different way. They're not going to be writing an essay when they get out of school. So what will they be doing? What will they need to write? So phonics and phonemic awareness, those two pieces of reading actually are helpful when it comes to writing, right? To be able to know and jot down the notes that you might need to help either a customer or help your boss or whoever it might be to leave notes, that type of thing. What does that look like? It's not an essay. So, all right, with that, let me take you into another little article that I'd like to share with you. And let's go right up here. 1 second. There we go. And I'm going to take you into this one. So what I've done here is a little different probably as some of the other presentations you may have seen. I did not want to just type in things onto the PowerPoint and be like, okay, this is what you need to do, but instead take you to some of these articles that are available to you, because I think it's important for us to kind of know where to look for them. So this one was written in 2017, so it's still current, but it is about 12 skills students can work on now to help them in careers later. And what you're going to see from this, amazingly enough, is that it connects directly to what we just talked about coming from the Florida Department of Education into Employ Florida, right? So let's go head down and you can see the first one's analytical thinking. Okay, so being able to problem solve. And I seem to keep saying this, which tells me it's important. And what I mean by that is if I'm saying it in every single web page or PowerPoint slide that I'm going into, then we know that analytical thinking is important. So we need to be teaching it in the schools. Although we are, it's still important to be a little bit more direct, even sharing with students exactly what this means, right? The step-by-step approach that breaks down complex problems into individual and manageable components. Now think about this. If you have students that sometimes struggle in learning, they get overwhelmed when you give them too much information at one time. So how do we teach them to take a situation that's a big one, right, and break it down so that way they can manageably get through the situation at hand? We have to teach them that. All right. And so with that, you can see on this website here is that they give you a lesson that helps to break down the thinking into 3 simple steps. So I'm not going to click on that now because you do have the website on the PowerPoint whenever you decide to, or as you're watching this. But I do feel like these different little lessons that we can teach our students are going to help them through literacy in employment. How about design thinking? So this is interesting here. So this one is about being kind of solution focused and action oriented. Okay, so it's giving them the idea of looking at a problem and from a different perspective. So we kind of talked about that through just communicating with other people, right? Opening up this idea of a new perspective, understanding that other people have different perspectives depending on their own lives. And how do we come to some certain understanding together? So this is another one here, and you can see that they've given you another link that could help you on how you could show students this idea of design thinking, right? Using STEM. So, and STEM is a big thing, especially the different stream. There's a lot of different ways to say this one, but STEM is important, right? Science, technology, like we're definitely mathematics. So how do we get students really interactive in that? And there are a lot of times at schools, different ways to do that, like different programs that you might have in place. Maybe we get students that are interested in science and technology and mathematics to get into that and help them in this idea of design thinking, creative thinking. Critical thinking we've already talked about. So I'm not going to get too deep into this because I think you know what this one means, but it's about making those reasonable judgments that are logical. but well thought out, right? So like you really critically have thought about it. What does this really mean? And in the employment industry, like, I've made mistakes myself where I don't tell my boss something that I figured it was already taken care of. Nope, they want to know. So, to critically think through, I've problem solved it. So therefore I'm good. But what does your boss need to know and what don't they need to know? Is still part of this idea of critical thinking. And what you can see here, the activities that they have shared with you that can help your child or your student in critically thinking is this idea of close reading, which is a beautiful way to instruct reading. And all that is that you're taking a bigger, let's say that you are, I'm going to bring you into a novel, even though I don't want you to focus on that, but even if you were to look at a job and even that website I showed you for employment, there's a lot of information on there. A close reading activity with that would be to just kind of look at a small section of it, read it, and then talk about what it means. What is it asking us for? Okay. What is it looking for from me? So those are the types of conversations you would have. That's going to help them break things down into smaller pieces that are more manageable to be able to critically think about. This does share that essay writing is a good way to do that too. Now, what I want to share with you on that is that yes, reading and writing go hand in hand. Okay, so if we're going to break down this idea of reading and comprehending, then we can easily transport that into a type of writing. Okay, I don't know that it has to be essay writing per se, especially at the higher levels, unless we're looking at getting them into not just career, but college. So we do know that they have to write an essay a lot of times to get into college. So that's where I see a great benefit through the essay writing. So it really just depends. And since we're talking about employment, it's a little different. But for college readiness, essay writing would be important to get them in. Scientific hypotheses and predictions. So if you think back to that comprehension wheel I shared with you, predictions are in that within the thought process. So it's like, remember, it's I'm sorry, it's not within, it's beyond. So within's like you're more in, straightforward type of thinking. Beyond is deeper, and about is even deeper than that. So this idea of making predictions is beyond the thought process, or beyond, with in this case, beyond I guess it's like that middle space of thinking. So it's a little bit harder, right? It's not in your face. It's kind of like, okay, here's what I'm hypothesizing. I'm thinking this will happen. And then I'm going to make predictions on what will happen if I do this. What would the outcome be? Or what if I do that? What would the outcome be? So what a great conversation, again, to have with students in school, right? Giving them some type of hypothetical situation and then them coming up with two different possibilities of an outcome and discussing what that might look like. So this will help with critical thinking in the school to help them think through what is necessary in order to be successful when you're out in the real world and how you make your decisions based on your critical thought. So you're going to see here again, collaboration and teamwork. Again, this was huge in every one of the jobs that I was looking at when it came to the Employ Florida, which is the abilities. That was the website we had joined earlier, Abilities Work. So that idea of collaboration where we need to get students working together. In some way, where they're working in a group, they're capable of being able to have a conversation, they're capable of being open-minded. What does that look like? So if we have expectations for students, we have to model what that looks like for them. And so if so even doing like a fishbowl activity with the students to be able to show them what it would look like to be open-minded to an idea and the possibility of great outcomes, and even a fishbowl activity where you're not open-minded and see what the outcome is. Okay, we talked about decision-making, initiative. This is a good one for career because you want to be able to show your employer that you want to take initiative, but you're humble, right? So I want to take initiative. I want to do my best. I'm going to ask questions when I need to. I'm going to go above and beyond where I can. And so that's a great one to talk to students about. How do you go above and beyond? What does that look like? Now, with this one, this is entrepreneurship. I think that we have a really tough time in schools these days teaching social studies. I'm a big proponent of social studies in the schools. It's not tested, which is why a lot of times it gets pushed under the rug. But social studies is the basis of literacy too, in the sense that it helps our students to know what it's like to be citizens in society. And unfortunately, with us not focusing on it as much, we see a lot of things happening in our world that maybe wouldn't be happening otherwise. So there's my opinion. But when it comes to facts and research, one thing that we want to teach students is economics. Okay. And economics goes hand in hand with being an entrepreneur or understanding that basis. So economics is all about, right, wants and needs, choices that we make. Where do you spend your money? Where shouldn't you spend your money? How do you decide? What do we do if we want, we have some great idea? Can we be creative and create something? How do you save your money? Where should you spend it? So like any of those things goes along with economics actually. And like I said, we don't really talk about it enough, but it's the real life thing. And to be honest with you, in economics too, it does come down to this idea of, how do you write a check? People still write checks. It still happens. I don't know if it always will, but they need to be aware, right, of the money that they're making when they get a job. What do I do with my money? Do I save it? Do I spend it? If I'm saving it, what am I saving it for? All right. So we need to start to show them what that means. What does it look like? Especially when it comes to the idea of saving and spending. So that way they can do what's best for them in their own lives, right? So then that's what we're preparing them for, is real life. Organization. I'm sure you have some students out there that are a little not, unorganized. Maybe we help them in kind of figuring out how to become a little bit more organized. So a conversation I have a lot of times with the college students are calendars, like get a calendar. And even if I'm one that I use my cell phone, and I also use a calendar that I write on in pencil so I can change things around. But that is so important to know when you have things. I have double booked myself, triple booked myself. It's not a good look. We need our students to be organized. What does that look like? And even though you might think they know, teach it. Trust me, it will help them in the long run if I'm still talking to doctoral students about how to organize their time. Persistence. So obviously it's all about going for what you want and being persistent at it in a very respectable and professional way. So what does it mean to be persistent? Teach them that. Problem solving, we already talked about. Risk takers. Okay, so we need, at least according to this article, risk is something that we need to talk to students about. And so they're saying that it is important for the modern work environment. And you need to teach explicitly how to take calculated risks. And so you can click on this. This is a hyperlink. It will take you to an idea of how to teach students how to be risk takers in a really professional way. And then self-direction, which is our last one here. This one to help students to be more self-directed. So what we know in high school is everything is kind of laid out for them, middle school, high school. So, right, like they know that they have a schedule. They know they have to be at a certain place at a certain time. But the teacher's always redirecting, right? So not always, but a lot of times. And so how do we help students to take that characteristic on themselves, to be more self-directed? So again, here you can find that there is another interactive learning platform that will help guide the students in some engaging ways on how to be a little bit more self-directed. So definitely check that out too. So I thought this was a really good article to kind of take you to because of all of those major aspects that we saw on the employee, like they're looking for those jobs, that we want to be sure that they have these skills with them, and we have different ways of making it happen for them. I'm not going to play this only because our time seems to be going really fast, but there's also a video here for you, and there's a lot of related content you can get into. Maybe as you go into the summer, this is a great thing to start to look at to prepare our students for where they're going, and using those skills here to start to implement them a little bit more strategically in the lessons that we're teaching our kids. So the next big one is that I want to take you to is this one here. So this is Education World, okay? And again, this website is on the PowerPoint, so you can easily find it there. But again, 5 ways to better prepare students for careers. So if we look at this, I want you to notice how combined this is. So when you find research that more than one person is saying, the more people, the better, are saying the same things, then we know those are important aspects to be kind of touching on. And again, number one is effective teamwork, right? To encourage teamwork, to not work alone, but know how to work together. And so that what they're saying here is that you can do this at school by encouraging more teamwork or on projects and assignments. And the thing is, I know this too from working with college students, and even whenever I was working in the elementary and the high schools and even consulting, the idea of teamwork is really difficult for students. So again, it's great to encourage it, and also teach them what it looks like. All right. So it's not about delegating work. You do A, you do B, you do C, and then we'll get together and put it together. That's not teamwork. Teamwork is a true collaboration, such as PLCs. So if you're familiar with professional learning communities by DeFore, then that is what I would be kind of actually centering. The way that I would create a group project with my students would be through the PLC format. So even though the professional learning communities is for teachers, it works just as beautifully for our students. And what a great way to get them prepared to professionally be able to collaborate. Future focused, again, teaching the complex thinking skills, right? So jobs in the modern place, here you can see it again, jobs in the modern workplace, they require innovation, creativity, and ability to look at a task and not only see the outcome, but also imagine different ways to achieve it. So that goes right along with the conversation we just had about giving students hypothetical situations and having them think through different ways to accomplish the goal and what those outcomes might actually mean, right, in a more creative way. What a great thing to do also in a group type format. Prep for college and career. So what they're saying here, this is interesting, and you're going to see this in the next website I show you, but this is a lot more about your school district as a whole. Like, how are they really putting things into place to help students to be successful? For example, looking at the standards and the curriculum, making sure that those go together to help the students as they leave to be more career centered or college centered, but also to give them opportunities within the school to do what they want to do. So for example, if I have a student that loves animals, okay, and I would be trying to get them into something with animals. Maybe they work at the Humane Society, they volunteer a few days a week, something like that, that gives them that real life opportunity to feel what it is that they seem to enjoy. And then they decide where they go with that, whether they decide to go to college, maybe they, that's not something that they're going to do, but they have opportunities to be and do what they love. Okay. And then that's where economics comes in, right? Where we start to teach them, well, okay, so if you do this, now we do have to think about your finances and what that looks like. These are real life conversations that we need to be having with our students. And as parents too, need to be having with our children. And this again is rounding out the curriculum. So this does give a lot with the school district and the conversations that we need to be having at our school level or district levels. But this brings us back to STEM again, which does say something. So this idea of science, technology, engineering, which again is economics, and math, we need to be looking at this for a lot of our students. So if they're loving science and math and that type of thing, then we need to be really centering them in on different careers that are STEM oriented that can help them in that area. All right, so then the last article I'm going to bring you into is the 5 steps for supporting. So this one, again, is very district wide. So as teachers, you do have a voice. Always remember that. And this is from the ASCD. And again, the website will be on the PowerPoint. But this one kind of talks about this idea of how do you really define college and career readiness. So if at your school level, you don't have a definition for what it means to get our students college and career ready, it's gonna be real difficult to help them. So I can give you all these little tips and tell you to go into the Employee Florida website, look at this, the skills that are there and start to teach your kids more strategically to those. But you really do, as a school, need to have a good universal definition of what you're talking about. What is college and career readiness? What does that mean? What does it look like? And then start to filter that out into the classrooms, right? So that is something that I would have a conversation with at a school level or district level. I already shared this too. Align the standards and curriculum. We know that. Track progress indicators. So a lot of times in special education, we do a lot of progress monitoring. So maybe your progress monitoring that you do is more focused towards the goal. So if we're already doing an action plan to prepare students for transition, how are we doing that? What does it look like? And what steps are we taking to help them to be successful? And through doing this research that you're doing, or even listening to this webinar, you might have a better idea of strategically how you will do that now that you know what the workforce is looking for. Okay, so then the next thing I want to talk about is to teach students soft skills. So I already said this, I'm going to say it again, but we can teach students how to do a job. For example, and this is a very simplistic example, but let's say that they're going to be a host or a hostess at a restaurant. I can teach you how to grab menus and walk somebody to a table. Okay, I can teach you that, not a problem. But something that students need to have ingrained in them are these ideas of soft skills. So how do we talk to a customer that comes into the restaurant? How do we help them to feel like they're at home almost, right? And then walking them to slow enough where they can stay with us, but not, not too slow where it's kind of uncomfortable to get to the table, right? And then how do you smile at them whenever they sit down? And having them, have them enjoy their meal. And you tell them that. So these are all soft skills that we want our students to be able to do. I just gave you a very simplistic example, but those are the types of conversations and things that need to be happening in the schools if we want our students to truly be career ready, right? Is what does it look like to have soft skills, to be able to talk to people, all of which is literacy based, right? So it's not all about, and I keep saying this, but it's not about a test. I said this in my last webinar, but it's not about a test score or whether or not you're passing, your state exam. I mean, yes, that's important. And it tells us if students are picking up on certain things, but it is not the whole picture of a student. The whole picture of a student is what they're capable of doing after you've taught them the real life skills they need to know. All right. And that's not to be able to say A, B, or C on a test. So I'm taking you out of that because you already know that's something you have to do. This is the reality of where we want our students to be. All right. So let's see. The last thing is change your mindset. Again, this kind of goes more so to the school level, but some questions to think about is to have a conversation about, especially if there's any supervisors that are listening to this webinar, maybe this will be helpful for you at a faculty meeting or at your school meetings. What does college and career readiness look like? Have that conversation with your faculty. What does it look like? Right? What are you doing in your grade level or subject area department to prepare more students to graduate college and career ready? So what are you doing? How are you helping them? And is it strategic? Because there's a lot of times we'll look at what we're doing, like I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, but don't just do it to check it off a list of things to say I'm doing it. How are you doing it? And how many of the students seem to be picking up on it? And are you being strategic in the sense that are you looking at the skills that are really necessary for the jobs that they want to help them to be successful? All of which is literacy based. Every single thing is literacy based. Even if you get into STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, it is still a base of literacy. So how are you helping them in literacy to be successful, truthfully? And then what can you do differently to make it even more strategic? All right. And then how can central services support college and career readiness in their school? So think about that. Like, are you being supported by administration to do what's necessary in order to help the students to be successful? Through all of this, all right. So all of this being said, that's the last article I'm going to take you to, but I'm going to bring us back here into the employee Florida. And I'm going to take us back. Let's see if it'll let me take us back for a second. Sometimes this times out. All right, there we go. So once you go through these conversations at your district level and then really think about what you're doing at your actual grade level, and then how are you meeting the needs of your students? Do you know what they want to do? I don't know if you still do this. I think you do, where there's a test that comes out in middle school maybe, and students take it and it tells them what they should be when they get older. Like for me, I took it and I was supposed to be a buyer, which would be great, but I didn't go that way. But but and so that's not the end all be all either. Which is true, which do the students really enjoy doing, and then how can you help them in accomplishing that goal? So once you get through all of those pieces and you teach them how to collaborate and you teach them how to be problem solvers and you build their background with hypotheses and things and outcomes that could happen, then you bring them back here and we start to get them ready and prepared to actually apply for a job, right? And this tells you in this position, in this specific one here, all of them tell you exactly what they need to be able to do in order to get the job. All right. So in this one, let me see here. Okay. See if I can find where I was looking. But it tells you how to apply exactly what you need to be able to do in here. And so when the students decide to apply for this job, they're able to actually specifically write in here what they have available to them that would be great for this place of employment. So our next webinar is on Thursday. I'm just going to take us out of this. So I feel like we went through all of this information really quickly, but there's a lot more to be said, I suppose. Our next webinar, so this is the actual PowerPoint with all the websites I just shared with you. The next webinar, let me go back, is Thursday, and it's at 10 a.m. And that one's going to be more so based on the conversation and the idea of the interview process, right? So now that we've taught them how to apply for a job successfully, we've taught them some of the soft skills they need to be able to do that. We've helped them with critical thinking. And now they've applied for the job. The next step is the interview. What does that look like? What kind of questions might be asked to them? And how can we prepare them for that? That's what's coming up on Thursday. So I don't know if there are any comments and questions. I'm going to go ahead and stop here and see if there are.